Jake Harrison opened his eyes and felt pain shoot through his head. The last thing he remembered was walking into the meeting room on the Zentari homeworld. He had been there to talk about peace between Earth and the reptile people called Zentari. Now he was lying on a cold metal floor in a room he had never seen before. The walls around him were smooth and gray like polished stone. There were no doors that he could see. The only light came from strips in the ceiling that glowed with a blue color. High above him, Jake could see a small window. Through it, he saw faces looking down at him. The faces were not human. Jake sat up slowly and touched his head where it hurt. His uniform was torn and dirty. He looked around the room again. It was about 20 feet wide and 30 feet long. The walls went up about 15 feet to the ceiling. There was nothing else in the room except for some metal grates near the floor that looked like they brought in air. The faces in the window above were watching him. Jake could see their yellow eyes and the scales that covered their skin. These were Zentari, but not the ones he had met in the peace talks. These ones looked different. They wore white coats like doctors and held small devices that beeped and flashed with lights. A voice came from somewhere in the walls. It spoke in English, but the words sounded strange and cold. Human specimen is awake. Beginning observation phase. Jake stood up and looked up at the window. What is this place? Why am I here? One of the Zentari moved closer to the window. This one was bigger than the others and had more scars on its face. When it spoke, Jake could see its sharp teeth. I'm Dr. Vexstar. You are now part of our research project. We study how different species fight and survive when they face danger. What kind of research? Jake asked, but he was starting to understand that he was in serious trouble. Dr. Vexstar held up a small device and pointed it at Jake. We have collected creatures from many worlds. We test them against our greatest creation. It helps us learn about fear, about fighting, about death. Most species die very quickly. Jake felt his heart start to beat faster. You mean you're going to make me fight something? Not fight, Dr. Vexstar said with what might have been a smile. Run, hide, try to survive? Though none have succeeded for more than 30 minutes. Another Zentari moved next to Dr. Vexstar. This one was smaller and held a tablet covered in strange writing. Doctor, the human appears to be one of the weakest species we have tested. No natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. This test may provide little useful data. Dr. Vexstar looked down at Jake like he was studying a bug. Humans are interesting because they are so weak, yet they have spread to many worlds. We want to understand how such a fragile species survives in space. This test will show us their true nature when faced with a real predator. Jake walked to the center of the room and looked up at them. What kind of predator are you talking about? The Night Stalker, Dr. Vexstar said. We built it using the best parts from the most dangerous creatures we have found. It has the speed of a Corvin hunter, the strength of a Thraxian warrior, the intelligence of a Valdron stalker, and the killing instincts of a dozen other species. It is the perfect predator. The smaller Zentari looked at its tablet. Previous subjects have shown 3 main responses when released into the chamber with the Night Stalker. 40% freeze with fear and die without moving. 30% run in panic and die within 5 minutes. The remaining 30% attempt to fight and die within 15 minutes. What about the longest survivor? Jake asked. A Kovan soldier lasted 28 minutes, Dr. Vexstar said. It was faster than you and had natural claws. It still died screaming. Jake felt fear move through his body like ice water, but he tried not to show it. He had been a soldier for 10 years before becoming a diplomat. He had been in dangerous situations before, but nothing like this. He was trapped in a room with no weapons and no way out, and they were going to release some kind of monster to kill him. Why are you doing this? He asked. Knowledge, Dr. Vexstar said. We must understand our enemies and our allies. Fear makes all species show their true nature. Some become brave, some become cowards, some become clever. We learn from watching how they die. Jake looked around the room again, this time not as a prisoner, but as a soldier. He studied every surface, every shadow, every detail. The metal grates near the floor were held in place with screws. The walls had small scratches and dents from previous fights. Near one corner he could see dark stains that might have been blood. "How long do I have?" Jake asked. "The test begins in 5 minutes," Dr. Vextar said. "Use the time to prepare yourself. Pray to your human gods if you believe in them. Make peace with your death." Jake ignored the fear that was trying to take control of his mind. Instead, he began to think like a soldier again. He walked to the walls and pressed against them, testing their strength. He examined the air grates more closely. He looked up at the ceiling and tried to see if there were any weak spots. The Zentari watched him with interest. "Subject is showing unusual behavior," one of them said. "Most species spend their final minutes in fear or anger. This human appears to be studying the environment." "Interesting," Dr. Vextar said. "Perhaps humans are not as simple as we thought." Continue recording. Jake went to one of the air grates and tried to see if he could remove it. The screws were tight, but the metal around them was old and might be weak. He pressed his back against the wall and pushed against the grate with his feet. It moved slightly. 3 minutes remaining, Dr. Vextar announced. Jake took off his uniform jacket and wrapped it around his hands. He had an idea, but he needed to be ready. He walked to the center of the room and looked up at the watching Zentari. "I have a question," he said. "Speak quickly," Dr. Vextar replied. "Has anyone ever killed your Night Stalker?" The Zentari were quiet for a moment, then Dr. Vextar spoke with pride in his voice. "Nothing has ever harmed the Night Stalker. It is perfect. It cannot be killed by creatures like you." Jake nodded slowly. "We'll see about that." The Zentari looked surprised. Most creatures begged for their lives at this point. Some offered to trade information for freedom. Others simply cried or screamed. But this human was talking like he might actually have a chance. 1 minute remaining, Dr. Vextar said. "Prepare for release of the Night Stalker." Jake could hear mechanical sounds coming from the walls. Somewhere in the distance, he heard a sound that made his blood freeze. It was like a roar mixed with a scream, but it sounded intelligent and hungry. Whatever was making that sound was big and it wanted to kill. "Release the Night Stalker," Dr. Vextar commanded. Jake Harrison stood in the center of the room, his jacket wrapped around his hands, and waited for the monster that was supposed to kill him. But instead of fear, he felt something else. He felt angry. These aliens thought humans were weak and stupid. They thought they could use him like a toy and throw him away. When they were done, they were about to learn that humans were much more dangerous than they looked. The wall at the far end of the room began to slide open with a loud grinding noise. Through the opening, Jake could see glowing eyes watching him from the darkness. The Night Stalker was coming, and everything was about to change. The thing that came out of the darkness was worse than anything Jake had imagined. The Night Stalker stood 8 feet tall on legs that looked like they belonged to a giant spider, but thicker and covered in black armor that seemed to shine under the lights. Its body was long and thin like a snake, but it had arms that ended in claws the size of kitchen knives. But the worst part was its head. The creature had 6 eyes that glowed green in the dark, arranged in 2 rows of 3. Its mouth was full of teeth that looked like broken glass, and when it opened its mouth, Jake could see more rows of teeth behind the first ones. The thing made a clicking sound as it breathed, like someone tapping metal with a hammer. Jake had seen many dangerous things in his time as a soldier, but nothing had ever made him feel so small and helpless. The Night Stalker was built to kill, and every part of it was designed to be perfect at that job. The creature stepped into the room and the door slid shut behind it with a final clang. Now Jake was trapped in the room with the monster, and there was nowhere to run. Above them, the Zentari scientists leaned forward to watch. Dr. Vextar held his recording device and spoke into it. "Subject is human male, approximately 30 years old. Night Stalker has been released. Beginning timer now." The Night Stalker turned its 6 eyes toward Jake and made a sound that was part growl and part hiss. It moved its head from side to side, like a snake, studying him. Jake could feel those green eyes looking at every part of his body, deciding where to attack first. Most subjects are paralyzed by fear at this point, one of the Zentari said. This human appears to be watching the creature. Jake was indeed watching the Night Stalker, but not because he was frozen with fear. He was studying it the same way he had studied enemy soldiers in battle. He watched how it moved, how it balanced its weight, how it used its eyes to track him. The creature took a step forward, and Jake noticed something important. The Night Stalker moved like it was used to chasing things that ran away from it. Its legs were built for speed, and its claws were made for grabbing running prey. But what would it do if its prey didn't run? Jake stood perfectly still and kept watching. The Night Stalker seemed confused by this behavior. It made another clicking sound and tilted its head like it was thinking. Interesting, Dr. Vextar said. Previous subjects either ran or attacked immediately. This human is doing neither. The Night Stalker suddenly lunged forward with incredible speed. Its claws reached out to grab Jake, but he was ready. At the last second, Jake threw himself to the side and rolled across the floor. The creature's claws missed him by inches and scraped against the metal wall with a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard. Jake came up from his roll and immediately started moving toward the corner of the room. But he wasn't running in panic like the other creatures had. He was moving with purpose, keeping the wall at his back and his eyes on the Night Stalker. The creature spun around to face him, angry that its first attack had failed. It made a louder hissing sound and showed all of its teeth. Then it charged again, but this time Jake was ready for it. When the Night Stalker came at him, Jake waited until the last possible moment and then dove under its reaching claws. The creature was so fast that it couldn't stop in time, and it crashed into the wall where Jake had been standing. The impact was so hard that it left cracks in the metal. 2 minutes elapsed, Dr. Vextar announced. Subject is still alive and mobile. The Night Stalker pulled itself away from the wall and turned to look at Jake again. This time, its green eyes seemed brighter, and Jake could tell it was getting angry. Most of its prey died quickly and easily. This little human was making it work for its meal. Jake used the moment while the creature was recovering to look around the room again. He noticed that when the Night Stalker hit the wall, one of the air grates had been shaken loose. It was still attached, but barely. That might be useful later. The creature came at him again, but this time it was more careful. Instead of charging straight forward, it tried to corner Jake against the wall. It moved left and right, trying to cut off his escape routes. Jake realized he was dealing with something that could learn and adapt. The Night Stalker wasn't just a mindless killing machine. It was intelligent, and that made it much more dangerous, but Jake had something the creature didn't expect. He had fought intelligent enemies before, and he knew that intelligence could be used against itself. Smart enemies could be fooled if you knew how to do it. Jake started moving toward the loose air grate, but he made it look like he was just trying to get away from the creature. He stumbled a little and acted like he was getting tired. The Night Stalker saw this and moved faster, thinking its prey was getting weak. When the creature lunged at him this time, Jake was ready. He grabbed the loose air grate and pulled it free from the wall. The metal grate was about 2 feet square and had sharp edges where it had broken away from the screws. The Night Stalker's claws reached for Jake, but instead of finding soft human flesh, they hit the metal grate. The impact sent shocks up the creature's arms and made it roar in pain and surprise. 4 minutes elapsed, Dr. Vextar said, and Jake could hear excitement in his voice. Subject has improvised a defensive weapon. This behavior has not been observed in previous tests. Jake didn't stop to listen to the scientist. He swung the metal grate at the Night Stalker's head, and it had to jump back to avoid being hit. For the first time since entering the room, the creature was backing away from him instead of attacking. The Zentari scientists were all talking at once now. They had never seen anything like this before. Their perfect predator was being challenged by what they thought was one of the weakest species in the galaxy. The Night Stalker circled around Jake, looking for an opening. But Jake kept the metal grate between them and moved so that he always had room to dodge. He was learning the creature's patterns. and every attack taught him something new. When the Night Stalker tried to grab the grate with its claws, Jake twisted it so the sharp edges cut into the creature's fingers. When it tried to bite the metal, Jake pushed it forward so the grate hit the creature's teeth and made it back away. 6 minutes elapsed, Dr. Vexstar announced. This is already longer than most subjects survive. Jake was breathing hard now, but he wasn't panicking. He was thinking. The Night Stalker was strong and fast, but it had weaknesses. It relied on its claws and teeth, but those weapons were only useful if it could get close enough to use them. The metal grate was keeping it at a distance, but Jake knew the grate wouldn't last forever. Already, the creature's claws had bent some of the metal bars, and it was getting harder to hold. He needed a better plan. That's when Jake noticed something about the lights in the ceiling. The Night Stalker's eyes glowed in the dark, which meant they were probably very sensitive to light. What would happen if he could make the room brighter? Jake started moving toward the center of the room, still keeping the grate between himself and the creature. He was looking up at the ceiling, trying to see if there was a way to break one of the light strips and make it flicker or flash. The Night Stalker followed him, getting more and more frustrated. It was used to quick kills, not long fights. Its prey was supposed to be dead by now, not fighting back with metal tools and clever tricks. 8 minutes elapsed, Dr. Vexstar said. The human appears to be studying the environment again, most unusual. Jake saw his chance when the Night Stalker made another lunge at him. Instead of dodging to the side, he rolled backward and threw the metal grate up at the ceiling as hard as he could. The grate hit one of the light strips and broke it, sending sparks flying down into the room. The Night Stalker screamed and covered its eyes with its claws. The bright sparks had blinded it temporarily, and Jake used those few seconds to grab a piece of the broken light strip that had fallen to the floor. The piece of metal was about a foot long and had sharp edges. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was better than nothing. And more importantly, Jake was starting to understand how the creature's mind worked. The Night Stalker was a predator, but it was used to being the strongest and fastest thing in any fight. It had never learned to deal with prey that fought back intelligently. Jake was showing it something new, and the creature didn't know how to respond. 10 minutes elapsed, Dr. Vexstar said. This test is producing unprecedented data. Jake looked up at the watching Zentari and smiled. They had expected him to die screaming in the first few minutes, but he was still alive and still fighting. He was starting to think he might actually have a chance to survive this. The Night Stalker's eyes had adjusted to the light again, and it was looking at Jake with what seemed like respect. This little human was proving to be more interesting prey than it had expected, but Jake wasn't done surprising everyone yet. He had more ideas, and he was just getting started. Jake held the broken piece of light strip in his hand and watched the Night Stalker circle him. The creature was moving more slowly now, more carefully. It had learned that this human was not like the others it had killed. This one fought back and used tricks. 12 minutes elapsed, Dr. Vexstar announced from above. Subject has exceeded survival time of 60% of all previous test subjects. Jake could hear the excitement in the scientist's voice, but he tried to ignore it. He needed to focus on staying alive. The Night Stalker was getting smarter about its attacks, and the piece of metal in his hand would not be enough to stop it. Much longer, the creature made a feint to the left, then quickly switched direction and came at Jake from the right. But Jake had been watching its feet and saw the change coming. He spun away from the claws and swung his metal weapon at the creature's arm. The sharp edge cut through the black armor and drew bright blue blood. The Night Stalker roared and jumped back. Looking at the wound on its arm, it had been hurt. In all its fights, nothing had ever made it bleed before. The creature looked at Jake with what might have been surprise in its 6 green eyes. 15 minutes elapsed, Dr. Vexstar said. First blood has been drawn. The subject has wounded the Night Stalker. Jake heard the Zentari scientists talking excitedly to each other. Above him, they were using words he didn't understand, but their tone told him they had never seen anything like this before. The wound on the Night Stalker's arm was not deep, but it was bleeding steadily. Jake noticed that the creature favored that arm. now not using it as much in its attacks. He had found a weakness, and he planned to use it. Jake started moving differently now. Instead of just defending himself, he began to attack. When the Night Stalker lunged at him, Jake didn't just dodge away. He dodged toward the creature's wounded arm and tried to hit it again with his metal weapon. The creature was fast enough to avoid most of Jake's attacks, but not all of them. Jake managed to score 2 more small cuts on the wounded arm, and each time the creature's roar got louder and more angry. 18 minutes elapsed, Dr. Vextar said. The subject is now actively hunting the Night Stalker. This behavior reversal is completely unprecedented. Jake was breathing hard, but he felt something he hadn't expected to feel in this situation. He felt hope. The Night Stalker could be hurt, which meant it could be beaten. He just had to be smart about it. The creature tried a new tactic. Instead of charging at Jake directly, it started using the walls and ceiling. Its spider-like legs allowed it to climb up the smooth metal surfaces, and it tried to attack Jake from above, but Jake had been watching how the creature moved, and he was ready for this too. When the Night Stalker dropped from the ceiling, Jake rolled to the side and thrust his metal weapon upward. The point caught the creature in the soft spot between its armor plates, and it screamed as it hit the ground. Now the Night Stalker had wounds on its arm and its side. Blue blood was making small pools on the floor, and the creature was moving more slowly. But it was also getting more desperate and more dangerous. Jake realized he needed more than just one small weapon. He looked around the room and saw that his fight with the creature had damaged other things. Another light strip was hanging loose from the ceiling, and there were pieces of broken metal scattered on the floor. The Night Stalker saw him looking at the debris and understood what he was planning. It moved to block Jake's path to the broken metal pieces, but Jake had expected this. He threw his current weapon at the creature's head, making it duck, and then dove for the pile of debris. Jake's hands closed around a piece of metal that was longer and sharper than his first weapon. It was about 18 inches long and had been part of the light fixture. One end was jagged and would work like a spear point. 20 minutes elapsed, Dr. Vextar announced. The subject has now survived longer than 70% of all previous test subjects. The Night Stalker was angry now. It had been made to be the perfect killer, and this weak human was making it look foolish. The creature decided to end the fight quickly, even if it meant taking more damage. It charged at Jake with all its speed, claws extended and mouth open to show all its teeth. But Jake was ready. He had been planning this moment, and he knew exactly what to do. Instead of trying to dodge the charge, Jake stood his ground. At the last second, he dropped to one knee and held his metal spear with both hands, pointing it upward. The Night Stalker was moving too fast to stop, and it ran directly into the point of Jake's weapon. The metal spear went deep into the creature's chest, and the Night Stalker's own momentum drove it in even further. The creature screamed and tried to pull back, but Jake held onto the weapon and pushed it deeper. The Night Stalker stumbled backward, the spear sticking out of its chest. Blue blood was running down its armor, and its breathing was making a wet, gurgling sound. The creature looked down at the wound and then up at Jake with something that might have been fear. 22 minutes elapsed, Dr. Vextar said, but his voice was different now. The Night Stalker has been seriously wounded. This should not be possible. Jake pulled another piece of metal from the debris pile. This one was shorter but had a sharp point like a knife. He held it ready and watched the wounded creature. The Night Stalker was hurt badly, but it was not dead. It pulled the spear out of its chest with a wet sound and threw it aside. The wound was bleeding freely, but the creature was still standing and still dangerous. Jake knew he had to press his advantage while the creature was wounded. He couldn't give it time to recover or adapt to his tactics. He picked up another piece of metal and threw it at the creature's head. While the Night Stalker was dodging the thrown weapon, Jake charged forward with his knife. The creature tried to swipe at him with its claws, but Jake ducked under the attack and drove his knife into the wound in the creature's side. The Night Stalker screamed and grabbed Jake with its unwounded arm, lifting him off the ground. Jake found himself face to face with the creature's terrible mouth. He could smell its breath, which was like rotting meat and acid. The creature's 6 eyes were glowing brighter with pain and anger, and Jake could see his own reflection in them, but Jake didn't panic. Instead, he used the creature's grip on him to his advantage. He pulled his knife out of the wound and stabbed it into the creature's throat. The Night Stalker's scream became a choked gurgle, and it dropped Jake to the floor. 25 minutes elapsed, Dr. Vextar said. The Night Stalker is losing this fight. Jake rolled away from the wounded creature and grabbed another piece of metal. The Night Stalker was swaying on its feet now, blue blood running from multiple wounds. It was still alive, but it was clearly weakening. The creature made one more attempt to attack Jake, but its movements were slow and clumsy. Jake easily dodged the weak swipe of its claws and struck back with his metal weapon. This time he aimed for the creature's legs. The weapon cut deep into the joint of the Night Stalker's front leg, and the creature collapsed to the floor. It tried to get up, but the damaged leg couldn't support its weight. The perfect predator was now lying helpless on the ground, looking up at the human it had been sent to kill. Jake stood over the wounded creature, breathing hard but very much alive. He looked up at the window where the Zentari scientists were, watching in complete silence. Their perfect killing machine had been defeated by a creature they thought was weak and helpless. 30 minutes elapsed, Dr. Vextar said quietly. The human has survived longer than any previous subject. The Night Stalker is no longer capable of continuing the fight. Jake dropped his weapon and sat down on the floor. He was exhausted, covered in blue blood, and his clothes were torn, but he was alive. More than that, he had won. The Night Stalker was still breathing, but it was no longer a threat. It lay on its side, looking at Jake with eyes that no longer glowed with hunger. Instead, there was something else in those eyes, respect maybe, or fear. Jake had done something that no other creature in the galaxy had ever done. He had faced the perfect predator and won. But more importantly, he had shown the watching Zentari that humans were not the weak, helpless beings they had thought. The real test was just beginning. Jake sat on the floor next to the wounded Night Stalker and looked up at the window where the Zentari scientists were watching. The room was completely silent except for the sound of the creature's labored breathing and the quiet hum of the air. SYSTMS. Dr. Vextar was the first to speak. 35 minutes elapsed. The test is complete. The human has survived. Jake wiped blue blood from his face and stood up slowly. His whole body hurt, and he was tired, but his mind was clear and focused. The fight with the Night Stalker had taught him things about himself and about his captors that he hadn't known before. "Is that it?" Jake called up to the window. "Are you going to let me out now?" The Zentari scientists were talking to each other. In their own language, their voices excited and urgent. Jake could not understand the words, but he could tell they were arguing about something important. Finally, Dr. Vextar spoke to him again. "The test has produced unexpected results. We require time to analyze the data before determining next steps." Jake looked at the defeated creature lying next to him. The Night Stalker was still alive but barely conscious. Its 6 eyes were dim, and its breathing was getting weaker. "What about this thing? Are you going to help it?" "The Night Stalker served its purpose," Dr. Vextar said with no emotion in his voice. "If it dies, we will build another one." Jake felt anger rise in his chest. These aliens had created a living creature just to use it as a weapon, and now they were willing to let it die simply because it had lost a fight. He looked down at the Night Stalker and saw something in its eyes. That looked almost like gratitude. "You're monsters," Jake said, looking back up at the window. "You create life just to destroy it. You torture creatures for your experiments. You're worse than any predator." Dr. Vextar tilted his scaled head. "We are scientists. We seek knowledge about the nature of different species. Your survival has provided us with valuable information about human capabilities." "What did you learn?" Jake asked. "That humans are more dangerous than we calculated," Dr. Vextar replied. "You defeated our perfect predator using only improvised weapons and tactical thinking. No other species has demonstrated such adaptability. Under extreme stress, Jake walked to the center of the room and looked around at the debris from his fight. Pieces of metal, broken lights, pools of blue blood, and scorch marks on the walls. The neat, clean testing chamber had been turned into a battlefield. "You made a mistake," Jake said, still looking at the damage. "You thought you were testing me, but I was testing you too." The Zentari scientist looked confused. "What do you mean?" Dr. Vexstar asked. Jake smiled up at them. "I've been watching you this whole time. I've seen how you think, how you react, what surprises you. You're not as smart as you think you are." "Explain," Dr. Vexstar demanded. Jake picked up one of the metal pieces from the floor and examined it. "You build perfect weapons, but you don't understand strategy. You study individual creatures, but you don't understand how they work together. You think strength and speed are the most important things, but you're wrong. The Night Stalker was superior to you in every physical way," Dr. Vexstar said. "Yet you defeated it. How is this possible?" "Because I didn't fight it the way you expected," Jake said. "I didn't try to be stronger or faster. I used my brain. I learned from every attack, adapted my tactics, and turned its own strengths against it." Jake walked over to the air grate that he had pulled from the wall earlier. "You see this? You probably think it's just a piece of metal, but I saw it as a shield, a weapon, and a tool. That's what makes humans different. We don't just use what we're given, we make new things from old things." Dr. Vexstar was quiet for a moment. "This explains how humans have spread across the galaxy despite their physical limitations. You compensate for weakness with intelligence and creativity." "We don't compensate for anything," Jake said firmly. "Our intelligence isn't a backup plan. It's our primary weapon. And it's more dangerous than any claws or teeth." Jake began walking around the room, picking up pieces of metal and examining them. The Zentari watched him with growing concern. "What are you doing?" Dr. Vexstar asked. "Learning," Jake said. "Just like I learned about your Night Stalker, now I'm learning about your ship." Jake knelt next to one of the damaged air vents and looked. Inside, these air ducts connect to your ship's ventilation system. The electrical conduits run parallel to them. If someone knew what they were doing, they could access your ship's systems from here. "That is impossible," Dr. Vexstar said. "The chamber is completely isolated." Jake pulled some wires from the broken light fixture and twisted them together. "You isolated it from the outside, but you didn't think about what I could do from the inside. While I was fighting your monster, I was also studying your technology." Jake connected the twisted wires to a metal plate he had removed from the wall. Sparks flew, and suddenly the lights in the room flickered. The Zentari scientist looked alarmed. "How did you do that?" Dr. Vexstar demanded. "Basic electrical engineering," Jake said. "Humans learn to work with electricity and electronics from childhood. We use technology, but we also understand how it works." The lights flickered again, and Jake heard alarm sounds coming from somewhere in the ship. He had managed to cause a power surge that was affecting other systems. "Stop this immediately," Dr. Vexstar ordered. "You are damaging our equipment. Why should I stop?" Jake asked. "You were going to kill me for your experiment. You created a monster to hunt me. You treat living creatures like disposable tools. Why should I care about your equipment?" Jake connected more wires, and the alarm sounds got louder. "The thing is, Dr. Vexstar, you made another mistake. You assumed I was just a diplomat, but I was a soldier first. I know how to fight, how to survive, and how to cause problems for my enemies." "We are not your enemies," Dr. Vexstar said. "We are scientists seeking knowledge. You kidnapped me." Jake said. "You put me in a cage with a monster designed to kill me. You watched me fight for my life like it was entertainment. That makes you my enemies." Jake worked with the wires and metal pieces, creating what looked like a crude electronic device. "I've been thinking about your ship's design while I was fighting. You built this chamber to contain your test subjects, but you also built it to observe them. That means there are sensors, cameras, and communication systems built into the walls. Those systems are protected," Dr. Vexstar said, but his voice sounded less confident now. "Protected from outside attack, maybe," Jake said. "But I'm on the inside now. And I understand something about your psychology that you don't understand about mine. Jake held up his improvised device. You think in terms of creating perfect solutions for specific problems. You built a perfect predator to kill other creatures. You built a perfect prison to hold them. But humans think differently. We don't try to be perfect. We try to be adaptable. The device in Jake's hands started beeping, and more alarms began sounding throughout the ship. I don't need to break your perfect systems. I just need to make them work differently than you intended. Security teams are responding to the disturbance, Dr. Vextar said. You cannot escape this chamber. I'm not trying to escape, Jake said with a smile. I'm trying to communicate. Jake's device suddenly projected a holographic display that showed star charts and navigation data. The Zentari scientists gasped as they realized what they were. Seeing, this is impossible, Dr. Vextar said. Those are classified ship systems? Nothing is impossible if you understand the principles behind it, Jake said. Your mistake was thinking that humans are just clever animals. We're not. We're engineers, scientists, and problem solvers. We don't just adapt to our environment, we change it. Jake manipulated the holographic display, and the star charts changed to show Earth's location and the routes taken by human ships. You wanted to study human capabilities. Well, here's what you need to know. We're not just on Earth anymore. We're everywhere, and we're not just peaceful diplomats. The display showed images of human military ships, space stations, and colonies, scattered across dozens of star systems. We've been watching you too, Dr. Vextar. We know about your experiments, your research, your military capabilities. And we've been preparing. Dr. Vextar's scaled face went pale. You are saying that this was planned? I'm saying that humans always have backup plans, Jake said. You thought you captured a helpless diplomat? But every human who leaves Earth carries knowledge that can be used to defend humanity if necessary. Jake's device beeped again, and the holographic display changed to show the current location of the Zentari ship. Right now, my people know exactly where I am. They've been tracking your ship since you took me, and they're on their way. This is not possible, Dr. Vextar said. Our ship is invisible to your sensors. It was invisible to our sensors, Jake corrected, but I just changed that. The modifications I made to your systems are now broadcasting our location to every human ship in this sector. The Zentari scientists were all talking at once now, their voices high with panic. Through the chaos, Jake could hear Dr. Vextar giving orders in their language. Jake looked up at the window and smiled. You wanted to learn about human capabilities. Well, you're about to get a full demonstration. The alarms on the Zentari ship were getting louder, and Jake could hear the sound of running feet in the corridors above. Through the small window, he could see the scientists arguing with each other in their strange language. Dr. Vextar was shouting orders, but the other Zentari looked scared and confused. Jake's improvised device was still beeping and showing the holographic display of ship systems. He had done more damage than even he had expected. The modifications he made were spreading through the ship's computer network like a virus, changing security codes and opening sealed systems. Dr. Vextar, Jake called up to the window. You should probably stop those alarms. My people are going to hear them coming from very far away. Dr. Vextar pressed his face against the window, his yellow eyes filled with anger. What have you done to our systems? I've made some improvements, Jake said calmly. Your ship's computers are now sending a detailed report about your location, your crew, and your experiments to every human vessel in this part of space. They'll be very interested in what you've been doing here. This is impossible, Dr. Vextar said. Our security systems are the most advanced in the galaxy. Maybe, Jake said, but they were designed to keep people out, not to stop someone who's already inside from making changes. You never thought about what would happen if your test subject knew more about technology than you expected. Jake picked up another piece of metal from the floor and examined it. You know what the real problem is? You think like predators? You see other species as either threats to be eliminated or prey to be hunted. But humans don't think that way. How do humans think? Dr. Vexstar asked, and Jake could hear genuine curiosity in his voice despite the anger. We think like builders, Jake said. We see other species as potential allies or trading partners. We look for ways to work together instead of ways to dominate each other. That's why we've been so successful in space. The holographic display suddenly changed to show a new image. It was a human ship, sleek and powerful, moving through space toward their location. Then another ship appeared on the display, and another. The Earth Defense Fleet, Jake said with satisfaction. They received my signal. Dr. Vexstar stared at the display in shock. How many ships are coming? Enough, Jake said. You see, when you took me, you didn't just kidnap a diplomat. You attacked a representative of Earth. That's considered an act of war by my people. More ships appeared on the display, and Jake could see that they were surrounding the Zentari vessel. The alien ship was trapped with no way to escape. We do not wish to fight, Dr. Vexstar said quickly. We are scientists, not warriors. You created a monster specifically designed to kill other living beings, Jake said. You kidnapped me and tried to feed me to that monster. You've been capturing and murdering creatures from across the galaxy for your experiments. You're not scientists. You're serial killers. The lights in the chamber flickered again, and Jake heard new sounds coming from the ship's corridors. These weren't alarm sounds. They were the sounds of airlocks opening and closing, of heavy boots on metal floors, of voices speaking in English. My people are boarding your ship, Jake said. You might want to consider surrendering before they get here. Dr. Vexstar disappeared from the window, and Jake could hear him arguing with the other scientists. Their voices were high and panicked, and Jake caught a few words in English. They were talking about escape pods and emergency procedures. The door to Jake's chamber suddenly hissed and began to slide open. Jake tensed, ready to fight, but instead of Zentari soldiers, he saw human faces. 3 Marines in combat armor entered the room, their weapons raised and ready. Commander Harrison? One of them asked. That's me, Jake said, relief flooding through. His body? Am I glad to see you? The Marine looked around the chamber at the debris and the wounded Night Stalker. Sir, are you injured? Nothing serious, Jake said. But we need to secure this ship. The Zentari have been conducting illegal experiments on captured beings. There might be other prisoners. Already on it, sir, the Marine said. Captain Rodriguez is leading the search teams. We found several holding cells with creatures from different worlds. Jake looked down at the Night Stalker, which was still breathing but unconscious. What about this one? Our medical team is standing by, the Marine said. Dr. Kim thinks she can treat its injuries if you want to save it, Jake nodded. Do it. This creature was as much a victim as I was. The Zentari created it to be a killer, but it doesn't deserve to die for that. The Marines escorted Jake out of the chamber and through the corridors of the Zentari ship. As they walked, Jake could see human soldiers everywhere, securing the vessel and rounding up the alien crew. The Zentari were not fighting back. They seemed too shocked by how quickly their situation had changed. Captain Rodriguez met them in the ship's main laboratory. She was a tall woman with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Commander Harrison, we're glad you're safe. We've been tracking this ship for 6 hours since you disappeared. How did you find me so fast? Jake asked. Every human diplomat carries a subcutaneous transmitter, Captain Rodriguez said. When you were taken, it activated automatically. We've been following you ever since. Jake smiled. So my signal just made it easier for you to locate me exactly? That's right, Captain Rodriguez said. Though we have to admit we were impressed by your improvised hacking job. Our tech specialists are still trying to figure out how you broke into their systems with scrap metal and broken wires. They walked through the laboratory and Jake saw things that made his stomach turn. Cages filled with creatures from different worlds, all of them clearly terrified. Computer displays showing data from hundreds of experiments. Video recordings of other creatures being killed by the Night Stalker. This is worse than I thought, Jake said. They've been doing this for years. We're documenting everything, Captain Rodriguez said. This evidence will be presented to the Galactic Council. The Zentari are going to face serious consequences for these crimes. They found Dr. Vextar in the ship's command center standing, with his hands raised as human soldiers kept their weapons trained on him. The alien scientist looked defeated and scared. Dr. Vextar, Jake said as he approached, I told you that you were going to learn about human capabilities. How do you feel about your education so far? I underestimated your species, Dr. Vextar said quietly. We thought humans were weak because you lacked natural weapons and armor. We did not understand that your intelligence and cooperation make you more dangerous than any predator. We're not dangerous, Jake said. We're just very good at solving problems. The problem here was that you were kidnapping and murdering innocent beings, so we solved it. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. Dr. Vextar, you and your crew are under arrest for crimes against sentient beings. You will be held pending trial by the Galactic Council. Dr. Vextar nodded slowly. What will happen to our research? Your research into killing methods will be destroyed, Captain Rodriguez said. But your data on different species biology will be turned over to legitimate scientists, who can use it to help those species instead of harming them. Jake looked around the command center at the captured Zentari crew. You know what the real tragedy is here? You're obviously intelligent beings with advanced technology. If you had approached us peacefully, we could have worked together. You could have learned about humans through cooperation instead of through torture. We believe that strength was the most important quality in the galaxy, Dr. Vextar said. We thought that to survive, we had to be the strongest predators. Strength is important, Jake said. But wisdom is more important. And the wisdom to know when not to fight is the most important of all. 2 hours later, Jake stood on the bridge of the human ship ESS Defender, watching as the Zentari vessel was taken in tow. The alien crew was in custody, the captured creatures were being treated by human medical teams, and the Night Stalker was in surgery with Dr. Kim working to save its life. What do you think will happen to them? Captain Rodriguez asked, joining Jake at the observation window. The Zentari will face justice, Jake said. But more importantly, word of this will spread throughout the galaxy. Other species will learn that humans don't just defend themselves. We defend anyone who can't defend themselves. And the Night Stalker? If Dr. Kim can save it, we'll find a way to help it live a peaceful life, Jake said. It was created to be a killer, but that doesn't mean it has to stay that way. Humans are good at helping others change for the better. Captain Rodriguez smiled. The Zentari thought they were studying our weaknesses. Instead, they discovered our strengths. Jake nodded. They wanted to know what makes humans dangerous. Now they know it's not our weapons or our technology. It's our refusal to give up, our ability to adapt, and our commitment to protecting the innocent. As the human fleet turned toward Earth, Jake thought about what he would put in his report. The Zentari had tried to prove that humans were weak, but they had ended up proving the opposite. They had shown the galaxy that humans were not just survivors, but protectors, and that was a lesson that would change everything.